Here's a crazy statistic to put this in context. 90% of Chinese homes have been built in the last 30 years. And the most shocking part, 90% of people in China outright own their home. Compared to here, 65% and falling, even though it's supposed to be the most basic part of the American dream. The image of China that's in the collective imagination, with good economic indicators on paper, but a rundown backwater in practice, is just not matched by reality. China, of course, still entertains this idea to some degree. The country still calls itself a developing nation, as opposed to developed, because, quote, once you are advanced, you are declining. China isn't there yet. Still, today, I think most people think of China as a factory offering cheap labor and cheap stuff that breaks right away to the wealthiest countries. That hasn't been the reality for a while now.
看完刚才这段精彩集锦，相信不少人都会重新审视那个被反复描绘成落后、贫穷、只会生产廉价商品的中国。现实却是，短短几十年里，中国建起了现代化城市，高铁网络和完整的科技产业，让数亿人摆脱贫困，也让曾经被嘲笑的所谓鬼城，变成了真正有人生活的繁荣新区。更有意思的是，当美国人亲眼看到中国的街道、交通和日常生活之后，最先感到震惊的往往不是中国人，而是他们自己。原来那些年听来的故事并不只是片面，甚至可能完全错了。大家好，这里是华人视角频道。今天我们就来继续看看一个仍被许多人称作发展中国家的国家，究竟是怎样在电动车、太阳能、制造业和民生建设上逐渐走到了世界前列。中国当然不是乌托邦，但如果一个国家能让普通人的生活一代比一代更好，我们或许更该认真追问真正值得学习的到底是什么。
With very few exceptions, there is nothing in the program of Republicans or Democrats that is the least bit enticing. The only things on the menu are either doing nothing about the ongoing horrors or the same tired and utterly pointless posturing like getting men out of women's sports. There's absolutely zero ambition. No big ideas, no radical transformations, just the same things we've heard for 15 years while one party speedruns societal collapse and the other one rolls over and helps them. So, what are we going to do? Well, you might remember last year when Americans flocked to the Chinese app RedNote after Congress's TikTok ban.
So now American users are flocking to a different Chinese social media platform, making it the most downloaded app in the US. It's called RedNote.
The ban was designed to give American politicians and capitalists another way to control what people saw on social media. And it did the exact opposite.
I'm moving to China because what the fuck, America?
I'm thinking that this place is like North Korea. Like everybody's living in poverty, they're oppressed by their government.
I'm floored right now. I'm absolutely floored.
Oh my God.
We've forgotten about it now, but almost overnight, 500,000 Americans got direct exposure to Chinese people, life, and culture without the sensationalist filter of the corporate media. And it turns out, that makes a difference. I know that because I don't need to tell you what China maxing is. You're in a very Chinese time in your life, I'm sure. You know the words to Yi Jianmei. You wear the Beijing bikini. You are ready for what's coming.
Tomorrow you are turning Chinese. And I know that sounds intimidating, but there is no point in fighting it now.
Like, maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, but there's a good chance you've at least heard of things like Speed's live stream tour of China, or Hassan's, or even with a more mainstream media diet, seen videos like these.
When I tell them how modern the cities are, people are shocked.
I like living in a giant, industrialized, futuristic city because I grew up in such a small town America.
Americans are, more than ever before, getting a lot of exposure to what China actually looks like. And I can't lie, it looks good. Like, just look at this. This isn't the most thorough political analysis you've ever heard, I know, but name any city in the US that looks like this. New York, maybe, I guess. Compare any of these places to what they looked like 30 years ago, and it barely makes sense. Where in the US have the last 30 years looked like this? And it's not just the general vibe of the cities and the pretty lights and how clean they are. It is everything that supports them. Now, you can probably see where I'm going with this, but 26 years ago, China had 0 high-speed rail. Today, the country has over 30,000 miles, which is more than every other country in the world combined. That means that if you live in any Chinese city bigger than Mesa, Arizona, you're pretty much guaranteed to have access to all these other cities on a train from the future, and for as little as $13 a ticket. We don't have anything like that either. We have the Acela that costs $1 million and goes half as fast for all of like 30 miles. It lets you skip past Rhode Island and Massachusetts, which, if we had to have HSR anywhere, that was the right call. But that's just nothing like what China has proved is possible these days. And the most impressive thing is that a few years ago, no one believed in this. If you paid attention to politics in the 2000s and 2010s, you probably remember how common it was to see headlines about China's ghost towns. There were all these reports of huge cities sitting completely empty that supposedly proved that China was running around without any clue of what they were doing. They were building expensive trains to nowhere, connecting cities that no one lived in. Consider Pudong. Pudong was the poster child for the excesses and inefficiencies of China's semi-planned economy. Milton Friedman, the free market guy that got America on neoliberalism and invented the pencil, called it, quote, a statist monument for a dead pharaoh on the level of the pyramids. In jerk talk, that means a huge waste of money. And yet, fast forward a bit, and Pudong now has an occupancy rate of 99% and 4 times the population of Manhattan. And Pudong isn't alone. Kangbashi, Binhai, Tianjin, the Zhengdong New District. All of these places I'm definitely pronouncing right got the ghost town treatment. In 2013, 60 Minutes covered Zhengdong specifically like this.
He's showing us around the new eastern district of Zhengzhou, in one of the most populated provinces in China. Not that you'd know it. We found what they call a ghost city of new towers with no residents, desolate condos, and vacant subdivisions, uninhabited for miles and miles and miles and miles of empty apartments.
Here it is now. Over 1 million people, incredible infrastructure, public transit, and randomly, but importantly, 41 hospitals. Here's a crazy statistic to put this in context. 90% of Chinese homes have been built in the last 30 years. And the most shocking part, 90% of people in China outright own their home. Compared to here, 65% and falling, even though it's supposed to be the most basic part of the American dream. The image of China that's in the collective imagination, with good economic indicators on paper, but a rundown backwater in practice, is just not matched by reality. China, of course, still entertains this idea to some degree. The country still calls itself a developing nation, as opposed to developed, because, quote, once you are advanced, you are declining. China isn't there yet. Still, today, I think most people think of China as a factory offering cheap labor and cheap stuff that breaks right away to the wealthiest countries. That hasn't been the reality for a while now. These days, China might be the most advanced place companies go for the most high-tech stuff. Take one example. In the EV market, there's the car manufacturer BYD. These electric cars are radically cheap and fantastic, and in just a few years, they've become the global leader in this market. You might be hearing about it for the first time if you live in the US, because thanks to our insane tariffs, we can't buy what even the New York Times calls the world's best electric car. And the kicker is, their least expensive model sells for 10 grand brand new. I'm a car guy, and maybe that gives what I'm saying a little credibility. But if not, here's Ford CEO Jim Farley.
It's the most humbling thing I've ever seen. 70% of all EVs in the world, electric vehicles, are made in China. They have far superior in-vehicle technology. And even beyond that, their cost, their quality of their vehicles is far superior to what I see in the West.
I drive the Xiaomi. We flew one from Shanghai to Chicago, and I've been driving it for 6 months now, and I don't want to give it up.
And if all that sounds crazy, wait until you hear about Chinese solar power.
In China, a years-long investment in renewable energy is beginning to pay off.
Since China started taking climate change more seriously in the early 2000s, and especially since 2020, government subsidies to the solar panel industry have created what even the Financial Times can admit are rock-bottom prices. Production is so thoroughly developed, the battery and power conversion tech has improved so much thanks to China's investments in R&D, that now we have a solar panel overcapacity. The world literally cannot absorb it. Not to put too fine a point on it, but what the fuck have we been doing? And China was able to get there for the very modest sum of $18 billion in state money. We just spent twice that on losing the Iran war. And it's not just electric cars and solar power. Consumer goods like DJI's microphones, and drones, and cameras are world-class. Huawei's phones are incredible. Even iPhones. They're designed in the US, but here's Tim Cook.
There's a confusion about China that, and let me at least give you my opinion. The popular conception is that companies come to China because of low labor cost. I'm not sure what part of China they go to, but the truth is China stopped being the low labor cost country many years ago. And that is not the reason to come to China from a supply point of view. The reason is because of the skill and the quantity of skill in one location and the type of skill it is. Like the products we do require really advanced tooling. And the precision that you have to have in tooling and working with the materials that we do are state of the art. And the tooling skill is very deep here. You know, in the US, you could have a meeting of tooling engineers, and I'm not sure we could fill the room.
看完这期内容，最值得我们停下来思考的，也许并不是中国究竟有多先进，美国究竟有多落后，而是一个更根本的问题：一个国家到底应该把自己的资源、制度和未来用来服务谁？从选举季那些熟悉的竞选承诺开始，问题其实已经非常清楚：减税、降低生活成本、打击腐败、打破僵局，这些话听起来都没有错。可如果年复一年，政治人物只是在镜头前重复相同的口号，普通人的住房、医疗、教育和工作却越来越难以负担，那么所谓的选择，最后就只剩下了在不同包装之间做出妥协。人们不是不关心政治，而是逐渐失去了相信政治能够改变生活的理由。这也解释了为什么当美国人通过社交平台直接看到中国的城市交通、住房和日常生活时，会产生如此强烈的冲击。过去很长时间里，许多人认识中国主要依靠新闻标题和固定叙事。中国是连赚劳动力的工厂，是充满问题的威胁，是永远落后、永远即将崩溃的国家。可当真实影像出现在他们面前，看到高铁穿行在城市之间，看到整洁的公共空间，看到电动车、太阳能、电池和无人机产业形成完整体系，看到一座曾经被称为鬼城的地方最终住进上百万人，旧有的想象自然会开始松动。这并不意味着网络上的每一段视频都代表全部真相，也不意味着中国已经成为没有缺点的乌托邦。中国仍然面临青年就业、房地产调整、能源结构、言论空间和数字权利等问题。任何国家都有自己的矛盾，任何社会的发展都不可能只有光明的一面。真正重要的是，我们能不能同时看见成就与代价，既不盲目崇拜，也不因为偏见而拒绝事实。这期内容最有价值的地方，就在于它迫使我们比较两种发展逻辑。一种逻辑认为，只要某件事不能立刻带来利润，就没有投入的必要。另一种逻辑则愿意为了未来先建设道路、铁路、医院、学校和能源体系，即使这些项目在最初阶段可能并不赚钱。中国许多城市和产业的发展正是在这种长期规划、地方试验和国家投入的结合下完成的。它不一定适合被简单复制，却证明了一件事：公共目标并非只能让位于资本回报，社会也可以主动决定什么才是值得建设的未来。当一个国家拥有大量人才、完整的供应链和持续的研发投入，它得到的就不只是几款畅销产品，而是一种不断改进的能力。电动车的价格可以下降， 太阳能板可以大规模普及，公共交通可以连接更多城市，制造业也可以从模仿走向创新。相反，如果一个国家把最聪明的人才和最多的资源都吸引到金融投机、垄断平台和短期逐利的项目上，那么即使它拥有最先进的大学和最有名的科技公司，也可能逐渐失去把技术转化为普遍生活改善的能力。所以真正应该被比较的不只是高楼有多高，列车有多快，而是普通人能不能更容易的看病，能不能住得起房，能不能接受教育，失去工作之后会不会立刻失去尊严和基本保障。所谓国家竞争，最终不是少数企业家在排行榜上的名次，而是大多数人有没有比上一代活得更安全、更体面、更有希望。中国过去几十年的变化，至少向世界提出了一个无法回避的问题：贫困可以减少，基础设施可以快速完善，产业可以在国家规划与市场竞争之间不断升级。那么为什么其他国家不能做到？为什么一些最富裕的社会反而让住房、医疗和教育变成普通人一辈子的债务？为什么明明有足够的技术和财富，却总是缺少解决问题的政治意愿？当然，学习别人的经验不等于放弃自己的判断。美国不需要变成另一个中国，中国也不可能替任何国家直接提供现成答案。真正需要改变的是那种把一切公共事务都交给利润决定的思维，是那种把失败归咎于个人，把贫困解释成能力不足，把社会停滞包装成自由选择的叙事。一个更好的国家应该敢于提出大胆目标，也应该有能力把目标落实为普通人每天都能感受到的现实。我们不能只在选举时被动地从几个候选人中挑选一个，也不能满足于对坏政策不断表示反对。我们还需要追问，我们究竟想建设怎样的城市，怎样的医疗制度，怎样的教育体系，怎样的能源未来？我们愿不愿意支持那些需要多年投入、短期无法盈利，却能让社会整体受益的项目？我们能不能把愤怒转化为组织，把失望转化为行动，把对别国成就的羡慕转化为对本国未来的想象？如果这期内容留给我们一个最重要的启示，那就是不要再轻易接受任何国家都只能这样，普通人只能越来越辛苦的说法。现实并非天然如此，制度可以改变，资源可以重新分配，发展方向也可以重新选择。我们真正需要的不是更多空洞的民族优越感，而是面对事实的勇气，承认差距的诚实，以及建设更好生活的决心。你怎么看待中国的发展经验？你认为美国最应该优先改变的是住房、医疗、教育、交通，还是产业政策？欢迎把你的观点写在评论区，也欢迎点赞订阅，收看更多精彩视频。